how do we organize information that we acquire? One way that we do that is through using concepts. Concepts are mental groupings of similar objects, events, or people. For example, if I am thinking of the concept of hammer, most of the time the hammer that would come to my mind would just be a regular hammer that has a thing to hit the nail on one side and has the two prongs, the two-pronged thingy to pull a nail out with the other side. But within this concept of hammers, I might also have like a drywall hammer, drywall axe, which has the hammer end for driving nails on one end and a little hatchet thing on the other end with a little notch in it so that you can trim drywall with it and pull out nails with it. I might also have a rubber mallet in there or a plastic mallet. There's all kinds of different types of hammers. And all of those different types of hammers are grouped together in my concept of hammer. Our example on the screen here is birds. So when we think about birds, there's a lot of different types of birds. Our concept of birds are usually something with beaks, with wings. Usually they fly. We know there's exceptions like a penguin, and there's like a flightless cormorant and things like that that don't fly, but still those are all within our concept of birds. Now, with our concept of birds, or any concept that we have, this first bird or first hammer that comes to your mind is going to be called the prototype. So the prototype is kind of the most representative example of things within that grouping. So these concepts help us to remember things easier, recall information easier, and kind of understand things easier. So this slide is talking about prototypes. So once again, a prototype is the typical highly representative example of a concept. So for example, a bird, most people kind of think of a little songbird or a little sparrow or something. You normally wouldn't think of a kiwi or an emu, those types of birds that are just not really representative of most of the members of that group. For the hammers, you probably wouldn't think of a sledgehammer. You would probably just think of a regular hammer, and that would be the prototype. There are two main types of concepts that are talked about in your book. The first one is called logical concepts, and the second is natural concepts. Logical concepts are also referred to as artificial concepts. And in your book, you have a little problem. Unfortunately, your book is not in color, but there's groupings of different shapes and different sizes. I think it's stars and something else. And there's big stars and little stars and like big squares and little squares or something like that. And the logical concepts basically are constructed. For example, for that problem in the book, you may be needing to define what members, what things are a member of the group. Oh, it might be all little blue stars. Those would be having specific features possessed by all things in that particular concept. Natural concepts, on the other hand, are what you would call fuzzy or having fuzzy borders. And those would be things like the concept of pleasure, concept of love, what is a sport. These are things that might have different definitions or different meanings to different people. So that makes them have what we call fuzzy borders. Schemas are basically a cluster or collection of related concepts. So it's kind of a broader type of thing. For example, a schema of mammals would include horse, cow, manatee, primates. You can put like cetaceans in there, like whales, dolphins. All of those things are mammals. So the schema is basically our ideas about the particular group. Schemas are really important to us when we're like making judgments, making decisions, and things like that. It helps us with a lot of the automatic processing that we do. For example, when we think of a nurse, there's something called a role schema. And when we think of a nurse, we usually think of somebody who is maybe caring or compassionate, maybe competent in helping people deal with medical issues. Um, you may have a concept of a professor. What does your typical professor look like? How do they dress? How do they behave? Those are role schemas. A role schema of a police officer. Sure, you have a role schema in your head about a prison guard or a um, mental health professional. So we expect these schemas that we develop, which are based on the experiences that we've had with these groups, definitely help us to form kind of that quick opinion. If you've had like really good experiences with a nurse, when somebody tells you they're a nurse, you're automatically going to apply that schema of nurse that has all those positive characteristics to that person who's a nurse. Now, let's say that you dated a nurse, turns out she was psycho, slit your tires, did some terrible things, and then you are talking to somebody at a party. She seems really nice. She tells you that she's a nurse. Well, this schema of nurse that you have is going to put up some red flags for you and say, oh, this one's a nurse. You better walk away. Event schemas are a type of cognitive script. Like, for example, if you're waiting on a bus stop, there's certain ways you're supposed to stand there, look where the bus is coming. If you're going to ride an elevator, most people would get in the elevator, turn back towards the front doors, and then push the buttons. And that's the expected behavior or the cognitive script for riding an elevator. If you were to just get on the elevator, walk to the back, and just stand there, it would very much confuse people because it's not the expected behavior. So the event schema or cognitive script you would have about riding an elevator would be to go in, turn around, push the button. It's kind of the socially acceptable um, idea about doing that particular behavior.